Hey Fuji fans, this is Jason, and I am back to talk about the newly announced Fujifilm X-T5. As you know, I'm a Fuji fan, Fuji user, and honestly, I wasn't expecting it. I did hear the rumors, but I didn't really know when it was going to be released. So surprise, surprise, go on YouTube and boom, a ton of videos about it. I must say, first thoughts, I like it. I want one. I want to get one, but I'm not. And I'm not going to get one. I have too many cameras already, and I cannot justify it. But if you're a Fuji fan and like what Fuji does, this camera is on point for photographers. So what do you got? 40 megapixels. You got IBIS. You got the tilty screen that does the three-way tilt. So you're back to that X-T3 screen. So for photographers who don't like the flippy screen, that's a win. You still got a decent grip. There is no battery grip option, but you got the bigger battery from the X-T4. So I think that's a good compromise. I think a lot of times, manufacturers don't sell a lot of battery grips. It's probably something they don't sell a lot of, and it probably makes sense just to make bigger, more efficient batteries, which they have done, because from what I've seen, you get more shots out of the X-T5 than you do the X-T4. So that's a great thing. So where does it fall in the lineup? So from what I can tell, X-T5 is probably going to be not the flagship camera anymore, as we know. The XH line is going for that for Fuji, and I think they're doing that because we live in a hybrid world where we're doing video and photography, in most cases together. And I think they're catering to the professional, the uber professional at that, to use a hybrid camera to be able to cover both needs. And the XH line does that. I have an XH1, and that's kind of what I use it for. I'm primarily a photographer, but in the instances that I do some video, I have that in my arsenal of cameras to do some of the work, along with, say, an XS10. So those two are kind of like my hybrid models that I use. So that's kind of where I think the XT is going to be photography centric for the enthusiast professional who kind of wants just to concentrate on that. Although the X-T5 has great video features, and I think for most people that's all they really need, except if you're doing vlogging, then the flip screen would be better, but then you have that in the X-T4 and you have that in the XS10 and in the XH line. So you're covered in those regards if you need that specific. And I'd argue, because I had some points, so I pull out my paper. I got my paper. Come prepared, you write it down. So, and that's kind of one of my thoughts is, if you're someone who's interested in an X-T5 because you're photography centric, because you're an X-T3 user or X-T2 user, and you didn't want to get the X-T4 because it wasn't to your liking, I would argue that you probably should go for the XS10 if you're going to dip your toe into video, right? Because it has just enough video features on that camera to be the flip screen and also be your second camera. So if you got an X-T2 or 3, or even if you're going to get the X-T5 and you want something to do vlogging, you should just use something like an XS10, save a lot of money in terms of getting XH or XT, and you'd have a camera that can do the job. So that's my argument, because I use the XS10. I think it's fantastic for that. And also, what's funny about it is majority of these videos that you've watched, if you're a subscriber, hope you are, I'm doing on my phone anyway, because of the convenience of being connected to the internet. I use my phone. I have microphones and stuff like that, but I find myself, not really being bothered with all of the cameras. When it comes to photography, yeah, I'm taking my camera. But when it comes to video, if I really don't care about the quality, it's not for a client, for my personal YouTube, where I really just want it to be about what I say and not what not telling the whole story like I do with clients, I use my phone. I'm sitting outside, decent light, the mic is probably the most important, so you can hear me clearly and even, and that's what matters to me the most, So moving on. So now that we're moving into this 40 megapixel sensor world, what is the future? What do you think the future for Fuji is? So we mentioned XS10. Will there be an XS20? And also, will there be an X-T50? My mind says the XT double digit line, the 30, the 20, I feel like that might go away. I feel like in this world of, consolidation of cameras and things like that, I feel like they're going to shrink that. Because the XS10 was, I think it's a hit. I mean, I like it. And I think that is probably the best compromise for small camera that can be the baby to the XH and T at the same time. Because yes, it doesn't have the traditional dials of the XT line, but I think the size and compromise is probably where it fits the most, because to have another line under that would make a lot of cameras to be used. With a lot of cameras to manufacture, it's a lot of components, and then you got the XE, right? Although on paper it makes sense to do that, because then you have the XH and then the XS being the baby in the line for that. Then you have the XT, then the XT double digit, and then you'd have the X Pro and then the XE as a baby. So it makes sense. But is there enough market for all of that? I'm not sure. And then where does this leave the X Pro 4? And what will that be? Because I think the XT4 and the X Pro 3 probably had the same polarization in terms of their screens. And I think, will Fuji address that with the X Pro 4? Will they say X Pro 4, 40 megapixels, and do a tilt screen like they did for the XE4? Right? And not in the way that they did the X Pro 3, where the flip screen was in the inside, but more the traditional way that it's with the XT5 and the XT3 and the XT2 with the flip out, right? And maybe even a flip up like the XE4. Although I doubt they would do that. They're probably going to reserve that kind of screen for the XE4, and then a flip screen for the XS10, and then the X Pro line will either have no flip or, maintain the X Pro 3's flip with the inside, or just flip it traditionally like they do the XT5. So that's what I'm thinking. So I'm personally interested in the X Pro 4. And I also like the XT5, but I'm interested in the X Pro 4 because that's a body style that I haven't had thus far. I've had, I got the XH1, I have an XT1, I have an XE3, which is right here actually, my XE3 that I've been playing with lately with the 16 millimeter 2.8, which I just got. Shout out to Enrique. He's been a loyal subscriber and follower, and we've been communicating. So I bite the bullet and I bought it. So I'm going to do a review on that soon. And I got a nice little square lens hood for it. That's cool, right? And I got the grip for the XE3, by the way. So gives me a little bit more purchase on that handle. So great street shooting. Anyway, so yeah, I'm interested in the X Pro 4 because that's a body style of Fuji that I haven't had yet. And I've been looking at the X Pro 2 because I like that screen configuration. It's basically the same as the XE3 in terms of, the megapixels and sensor and all that. It doesn't flip screen. I don't mind that at all. And also the X Pro 1, but X Pro 1 would kind of seal the deal on not getting that is the diopter for the eye piece. Now I've heard you got to get these different screw-on lenses for it because it doesn't have a diopter built into it, and I'm like, that could be a deal breaker, because if I don't intend to use the back screen for everything, you got to find that, and you never know what you're going to find with a camera that old. You know, also doesn't have a electronic shutter in it. So between those two things, I'm like, it's probably too old of a camera. Let's think about X Pro 2 or the future in X Pro 4. So anyway, I done rambled and moved on past X-T5 announcement. But yeah, I think Fuji, just as an end to this video, I'm just gonna say this. I moved to Fuji because they make cameras for photographers and not the consumer. So they listen so well to their customers that they make cameras that we're proud to own, that we like, because they have us in mind all the time. I don't think really any other manufacturer does that. There's just simply no other manufacturer that I've come across that does that. They're usually part of a bigger corporation. Fuji is also, that makes other things, and they're really trying to make things to a budget, to probably things that are just already in stock, like sensors and body styles. The R&D is really focused in a whole different way, where I think a big part of the R&D for Fuji is the research part of the R&D, where they listen to their ex-photographers, they listen to YouTube, they listen to the to the customers, and what it is that we like about photography and video as well, and how we want to feel in terms of our camera. Because the camera itself is really just a computer these days, right? But just like, and so is our phones, but we shoot with cameras because the camera gives us something on the outside of that computer that engages us more. And so the camera engages us because Fuji engages their customers, and I love that about them, and they're doing great. So this X-T5 is really a great example of them listening. So kudos to them. Maybe in the future, I might have one in my possession. You never know. So that's it. That's all I got. Talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.